my name is Lindsay Carlson, and I'm going to be talking about Alexander Hamilton today. So during Alexander Hamilton's time in the United States, he made a large impact on many parts of American history, including the American Revolution, the creation of our government, and the revolutionizing of our financial system. Hamilton arrived in the U.S. on a ship from the Caribbean in 1773. After writing an account of a hurricane that plundered his hometown, the members of his hometown, Nevis, raised money to send him to New York. He was 21 according to their records. Alexander himself claimed to be 2 years younger. This would have given him a distinct advantage after his mother passed at getting apprenticeships, as younger children were more likely to be accepted, so he claimed to be 2 years younger. He studied at King's College for 3 years before joining the Revolution at 1776. Hamilton, eager to seize the opportunity presented, joined the Revolution. He wished to fight and rise through the ranks, as this was one of the ways that you could climb the social ladder and make your way. General Washington, however, saw a different opportunity and invited him onto his staff not to fight, but to write. Hamilton was present at many battles through the Revolution, but his job was often writing to Congress, asking for supplies, as in the winter at Valley Forge.
This is an artwork created by Percy Moran. That is Alexander Hamilton to the left of George Washington.
After 3 years of asking Washington for men to lead in the fight, Washington finally obliged. He granted Alexander with a battalion with whom he would fight with in the war that would come to be known as the final battle of the Revolution, the Battle of Yorktown. Hamilton helped lead the attack on the British Fort Redoubt 10, while the French attacked at Fort Redoubt 9. The simultaneous attack resulted in General Cornwallis's surrender and effectively winning the Revolution. When the war had been won, Alexander began his law practice. In his biography on Hamilton, Emeritus Professor of History Alexander de Conde wrote, in November 1781, he moved to Albany, where he studied law and was admitted to practice in 1782 of July. A few months later, the New York legislature elected him to the Continental Congress. He was known to be quite talented in court, but focused more on the current financial crisis looming over the young country. Though the Articles of Confederation served well in the Revolution, they were proving to be flawed at best, and the Continental Congress decided something needed to be done. They held a constitutional convention, of which Hamilton was invited to. He proposed a new form of government with greater central power, including a national bank. His speech was 6 hours long. The people were still uneasy about the Constitution that he was helping to make, because a greater central power was kind of what they did not want and what they felt happened with Britain. They feel like the states should have had more independence amongst themselves, but it was becoming far too difficult to become one union with everyone having their own separate state constitutions.
This is a newspaper clipping from the Independent Gazetteer. It states how Alexander Hamilton was one of the New York delegates chosen to represent in the Constitutional Convention that was going to be held in Philadelphia in the next May.
Hamilton then decided to devise a plan to create 85 essays to be published anonymously to defend the Constitution and explain it to the public. He recruited John Jay, James Madison, and together they created what would become known as the Federalist Papers. In the concluding remarks article, Hamilton wrote, "The judgments of many must unite in the work, experience must guide their labor, time must bring it to perfection, and the feeling of inconveniences must correct the mistakes in which they inevitably fall into their first trials and experiments." The Federalist Papers. He is here explaining the Constitution is nowhere near perfect and acknowledging that, but with this first draft, there is going to be mistakes and contradictions, of which it had many. They will be corrected, though, by the many eyes reviewing the document prior to its installment.
This is a photo of the hard copy of the Federalist Papers. They were originally published anonymously, but later came out to have their authors.
After the war, George Washington was unanimously chosen to be the first president of the United States. Washington appointed Alexander Hamilton to be the first Secretary of the Treasury, where he made his mark creating many of the financial systems we know today, including the Bank of the United States, the federal assumption of states' debts, which accumulated over the war, and created a stable paper currency.
This is a $5 bill from 1861 featuring Hamilton's portrait in the bottom right corner. These style notes were known as greenbacks because of their green ink. And we are all familiar with nowadays $5 bill with Abraham Lincoln on it.
After losing his son to a duel, Hamilton became much more subdued in later years. One of his final contributions was perhaps his influence in the election of 1800. The popular vote resulted in a deadlock between Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr. It came down to the delegates, and Hamilton had considerable influence over the Federalist vote. He was almost never in agreement with Jefferson, but he acknowledged that Jefferson had firm beliefs that would be difficult to sway. Burr, on the other hand, had a history of believing whatever benefited him at the time, regardless of his own beliefs. This even went back to when Aaron Burr became a Democratic Republican, taking Alexander Hamilton's father-in-law, Philip Schuyler's seat in the Senate, because it put him in a better financial spot and where he wanted to be, even though he particularly was not a Democratic Republican. Hamilton thus declared that his vote would be going to Jefferson, since he would be less easily swayed to what would benefit him and not necessarily the country. Our conclusion is that, unfortunately, this did result in a major blow to Aaron Burr's honor. He challenged Hamilton to a duel, and unless he apologized, it would carry forth. Stubborn as always and unwilling to compromise his own honor, Hamilton accepted. He was fatally wounded after firing his weapon in the air. There are many theories as to why Hamilton did not shoot Burr, but regardless, he is remembered, mostly for his impact on the United States, but also as the man on the $10 bill. Thank you so much.